right, we are live. My name is Maverick Evans, and welcome to the Fall Book Club. Today we are going to be covering chapters 11 through 20 of Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. So go ahead and pull out your hymnals, and we'll get going here. Just an announcement before we get started that there are multiple ways for you guys to support this book club if you so choose, because it does get a little bit expensive for us to continually be buying copies of books for our full discussions that we have on Saturdays, usually at 8 p.m. Central. So you can join us for those big group discussions. We have 3 other members that join us for those talks. And right now we're covering The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. So I usually have to buy books for everybody so that everyone has a copy and it's not, a burden to everyone. And so we just try and make as much money back on that as possible. There are links in the description below if you'd like to buy a copy of any of these books that we talk about and follow along. You can find links to those in the descriptions below. Whether you're watching a recording on YouTube or you're with us live right now on Twitch, you can find those. If you use those links on Amazon and purchase them through those links, a portion of the sale will go to support us. So we appreciate that so much, and every little bit helps out. So we really appreciate that, and hopefully we can get on to bigger and better things as well. We're trying to make this as great as possible. Right now we have another show in the process. I'll be sure to mention this again at the end of the book club today, that we are going to try and get an RPG style show up and running right now. We're doing all of the pre-production on it and getting it ready for you guys. So hopefully we'll have more long form discussion type storytelling stuff for you guys. We're working on a lot of things, so hopefully we're doing great. It's spring break right now, so I'm having a lot of fun having an extra opportunity to do this solo stream just as a bonus, just for fun. And you can see I'm wearing a spring break t-shirt from Beavis and Butthead, because you got to get in the spring break spirit here. A little silly, but yeah, so we have more time. Very excited, more time on our hands. So we're gonna go ahead and recap chapter 10. So chapter 10 summary. Barry, what's up, my guy? I do remember Barry Allen, the Flash. I remember you, Shirley. Also, let me go Streamlabs. How have you been, my guy? I need to go in and change my widget real quick, because that color is not going to do it for me. Okay. There we go. Hopefully that'll work. I do remember you, Barry. How are you? How are you, my guy? Doing well. Just here trying to stay healthy, stay out and about, working, going to school, and starting new shows here on the Twitch channel. So we got the book club going. I'll probably be streaming video games tonight after this show. I'll probably take an hour break to eat or something like that, and then get back to it with some kind of video game. But today we're talking about chapters 11 through 20 of A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. And we're going to go ahead and get into chapter 10 just to recap. I'll read the summary real quick. At the field hospital, Henry lies in intense pain. Rinaldi comes to visit and informs Henry that he, Henry, will be decorated for heroism in battle. Henry protests, declaring that he displayed no heroism, but Rinaldi insists. He leaves Henry with a bottle of cognac and promises to send Catherine to see him soon. And another scene that really made me wonder about Rinaldi, mostly because he behaves like such a woman when he sees Henry laid up in bed. So again, Rinaldi's just being like really, really motherly. He's extremely worried for Henry about how he's hurt, and he seems overly emphatic about the fact that he is going to be awarded as a hero, like medals and stuff like that, at least a silver medal for his heroism. And we get to see again Henry's stoicism in his response, saying that he does not care about the medals. He didn't do anything that was heroic in the first place. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. and he's extremely injured at the moment. His kneecap is like blown apart. Oh, it's very rough. One thing that I forgot to mention last week when we discussed the previous chapters, Aaron Shack 64 brought this to my attention, that before Henry had gone out to the field and suffered his major wound from a mortar shell explosion, he was given by Catherine a wooden St. Anthony's icon on a metal chain. And it describes in the book, too, that whenever that happened, when he comes to, he realizes that he has lost his St. Anthony's icon and that it's gone. An interesting thing that Aaron Shack mentioned in chat the other day is the fact that that if you were going to pray to St. Anthony, it might be for something that you've lost or something that you're looking for. So I think it's interesting that whenever the explosion happens, he loses his St. Anthony's icon. I think maybe if you wanted to try and translate that into some sort of symbolism, you could say that him losing that icon is further solidifying his loss in faith, his loss in direction, just in the world in general, and that Henry doesn't know where to go, and that things are very uncertain and enveloped in chaos for him, especially now that we enter into this next chapter, 11. He just has no idea what's going to come next. And I think that specifying that Hemingway specifying that he lost that St. Anthony's icon during the explosion and the injury is somewhat important. So a cool thing that I didn't mention last week but wanted to make sure to take a note there. So we're now into chapter 11, and this is some good stuff here. We're kind of entering into a more calm state in these next chapters. It's more smooth. We don't have as much action anymore. And it's really very monotonous. A lot of the same stuff happens over and over. So chapter 11, the priest comes in to visit Henry. Henry and the priest talk. The priest gives Henry some gifts, and Henry confides in the priest that he hates the war. The priest theorizes that there are two types of men in the world: those who would make war and those who would not. And Henry laments that the first ones make the second ones do it, and then he helps them. So he tries to make an argument, Henry does, that he's not either one of them. He's not a man that would make war, and he's not a man that would attempt to prevent it. He's somewhere in the middle. He kind of works for both sides, and this is again just kind of I guess a testament toward Henry's agnosticism, his indecisive nature toward human existence, faith, everything. He just doesn't know where he lands in any place in the world, not even his full stance on war. And Henry basically says that the war will never end. The priest insists that it is not impossible, but that he too has trouble keeping hope and faith. The conversation turns toward God at this point, and the priest defends his beliefs against the other officers that tease him. So, of course, like usual, we see multiple scenes throughout the book in which the priest interacts with Henry at a pub or bar, and they kind of give him... Oh, is that not working? Let me see. Someone tried to use the command for the Discord. It should be up. The Streamlabs things is open. If the Streamlabs commands aren't working, you can use the description below. There should be a link there for the Discord. So yeah, they have these multiple interactions between the priest and Henry, and these officers are always making fun of him for being a man of God. And this is kind of the moment where the priest defends his beliefs and his faith and makes the argument that he isn't just one of those... this book takes place... This book was written 11 years after World War I, which was virtually the same year that the Great Depression started, and the book takes place during World War One. So, and I can show you, it was published in 29, which is 11 years after World War One, and the exact year that the Great Depression started. So yeah, this was right during World War One. So yeah, he's making an argument. It seems to me in this scene, in this chapter, that the priest is getting kind of fed up with the fact that he has to deal with all of these naysayers, all of these crude men that are like throwing all of these really rude japes toward him about his dedication to the Lord. And he's kind of found that Henry is someone who might be able to listen to him. So in this circumstance, it's almost as if Henry is that open listening ear that usually the priest serves as for other people. So it's an interesting position here. It's almost as if Henry has taken the place of the priest, and the priest has taken, the place of, I don't know, a congregation member or something like that. The priest says that a man who loves God is not just a dirty joke, and Henry cannot say that he loves God, but he does admit to fearing him sometimes, which I think is a really interesting thing to say, because honestly, if you had to take a look at like a lot of the people that claim to be, what time period does this take place? Yeah. Oh, Weston, welcome in, my guy. I didn't see the color change in your name. Welcome in. Good to see you, Weston. So yeah, this is an interesting kind of relationship and dynamic that Henry is taking on with the priest. And the fact that Henry says that he fears the Lord but can't say that he loves him is really interesting, because what that basically says to me is that he almost has a keen awareness and relationship with God that some other like Catholics or Christians that profess their faith don't have, because his actions kind of reflect the fact that he fears God and other people's don't. So I don't know. Interesting thing on that. The priest concludes by telling Henry that he has a capacity to love, and that right there is huge as well in and of itself. He makes the distinction between sleeping with random women at a brothel and fully giving yourself over to another human being. And he assures Henry at that point that eventually he believes that Henry will be called upon to love truly. And Henry remains skeptical about this, and the priest says goodbye to him, and Henry falls asleep. So an interesting thing that happens here at this point in the story, the reason I think that Henry is skeptical about the whole thing is because it can be hard sometimes to not get your hopes up about something that you would really want. I think Henry does really want to love truly, and if he didn't, it would be odd for him to have even pursued and allowed Catherine Barclay to enter into his life the way that she has. So I think that some weird stuff is going on in Henry's head. He doesn't know what to think about it, and now this idea of true love, of loving truly, has been introduced explicitly by the priest, and is now one of the main goals that Henry has as he goes forward through his life and as the book continues. So that's basically chapter 11. We will move on into chapter 12. And this is some interesting stuff here. The doctors decide that Henry could get a better treatment in Milan, so they arrange to have him sent there. And already this is going to be a painful ride, because whenever he was first put into an ambulance to bump all the way back to the first hospital that he was put into, it is a painful ride because his knee is destroyed. Like, his kneecap is like hanging out and everything. It's like gory. It's awful. It's terrible. And so Rinaldi and another major in the army from Henry's company come to visit him. and they get drunk together while talking about the war and how America has declared war now, and that President Wilson will surely declare war on Austria soon as well. And Rinaldi ends up telling Henry that Catherine will be transferring to the hospital in Milan to work. The next morning, Henry sets off for Milan on a train and gets so hammered. Henry gets so drunk on the train that he pukes on the floor there. Like, it's actually super ridiculous, the fact that that Henry is drinking so much throughout this entire book. Like, he's a straight alcoholic. There was one point there's like a talk that, you know, the whole, what's the show, Drunk History, that it's just kind of ridiculous too, because the fact of the matter was that, like, history kind of was drunk in the first place. I feel like alcohol consumption was like really high. I don't know if it's true or not, but like the access to clean water was not as well in certain places, so you might drink a wine or some kind of fermented or distilled liquid in place of it, just because it had the calories there, the caloric intake assistance, as well as the fact that, you know, you boiled out everything, so it's not going to hurt you anymore. Yeah, that's the kind of train ride I want to be on. I don't know. I feel like getting drunk on a train would be bad, especially if there's any like motion movement. Of course you would throw up. This just sounds terrible. Henry just can't help himself, and I'm sure part of that, I don't even know, I'm sure part of that is like trying to numb the pain of his knee. The book doesn't mention it a lot. Just here and there it says that he has like this sharp pain or this dull pain in his knee at all times, and so he pretty much tries to stay drunk this whole experience, trying to get through this injury. And I can't think for the life of me how that's going to help him recover from this injury at all. I'm pretty sure it's just going to make things worse, more inflamed, and you know, definitely not benefit him. But there he is, pukes on the floor. Had one last talk with Rinaldi for a little while, and yeah, that's pretty much it. They have a few pieces about what America's up to, President Wilson. So that's chapter 12. Again, just to remind everyone, these chapters, that's why we're covering 10 at a time. These chapters are very short, and we get through them like super quickly. So we're going to cover 10 at a time until we hit 41. I think there are 41 chapters here. So chapter 13. So travel is not as efficient as it used to be. In addition, since the different country states that he is residing in are usually smaller, it doesn't take that long to get from one side of the country to the other, as it might say like in America. It would take a long time. Especially during World War I, these travel times would be pretty extensive, especially if your transit is a train. So after 2 days of travel, Henry finally makes it to the hospital in Milan. Now, the hospital is empty and without a doctor. So I'm pretty sure that in the book it specifies that this specific hospital was recently erected and that there was a need for a new hospital and that they had just built it. So construction ended at this place not too long ago, and they haven't had an opportunity to staff the building yet. So they only have like one nurse there and like maybe a few other faculty. Henry right there meets with the superintendent of the hospital, which is basically the only person there. Her name is Miss Van Kampen, and like immediately they meet together, and it's like those like chibi meets where they lock eyes and like static electricity sparks between them. Yeah, they don't get along very well. Just right off the bat, they dislike each other, and so Henry tries to get her to bring him some wine with his meals, which like is an interesting thing to ask someone who you know that doesn't like openly doesn't like you. She obviously refuses on the technical grounds that he doesn't have a prescription for wine, and which I guess is a thing you could get back then. I don't know. I've never heard of like prescriptions for wine, but I've heard of like clearances, like you can get cleared, you're cleared to drink wine. But anyway, Henry finds a loophole, of course, because like half of this book is Henry just getting like absolutely trashed. Like almost like a quarter of the book is just Henry getting super drunk. So instead, Henry's like, okay, fine. Well, you won't send me for any wine. I guess I'll just have to have the porter bring me several bottles of wine and the newspaper. The porter brings him like 4 or 5 bottles of champagne or cognac. It's ridiculous. I don't even know why he needs this much, but I guess he's just storing up so he doesn't run out. And even in the end, Miss Van Campen ends up sending him like this peace treaty offering almost of this like glass of spiked eggnog. So I mean, he ended up getting even more alcohol in it, like in addition to the ones that he snuck in. Although I do think it's cool that there were like porters and stuff like that you could have like go out and get you things and bring it back. That's basically like Uber Eats, like old school, old classic style. Gosh, my nose is so itchy. It's dry. Oh. Okay. So that's essentially chapter 3. Henry gets drunk again. So the last 2 chapters has been Henry just getting super drunk. Okay, so chapter 14. In the morning, Miss Gage shows Henry the vermouth bottle that she found under his bed. And instead of getting mad, so Miss Gage is another nurse. She's just one of the other nurses that have come in. I think by now they had an issue with almost getting Henry into a bed because there was no one to check him in. So they're like, technically you can't even be here because we're not operating yet. And of course the soldiers convinced them to let him in and to have a bed and everything like that. So they just throw him in an empty room. The next day he gets some service. Miss Gage comes in and finds the bottle of vermouth. And he kind of gets a little worried at some point, a bit apprehensive about the situation because, like, well, I was told I couldn't have any alcohol, and here is, like, several bottles of alcohol that are all empty. And so she is not angry for whatever reason and instead tells him, well, why didn't you invite me for a drink? And smiles and laughs with him. And Miss Gage says that in this very casual conversation, which Henry is delighted by because he thought he was going to get an earful. He thought he was going to get chewed out for bringing some more alcohol in. But luckily he doesn't, and Miss Gage continues the conversation very amiably, or amenably, whatever. She says that Miss Barkley has arrived at the hospital, and she doesn't like her. She says, I don't like that Miss Barkley. I do not like her. And of course, like, the only way that you can respond to that whenever someone tells you that, like, yeah, I don't like your girlfriend, whatever, like, you know, you don't want to be like, okay, yeah, well, I don't like you then. Screw off, Miss Gage, whatever. And he instead says, well, just spend some more time with her, and I'm sure that you'll end up liking her eventually. Just give her a try. You just got to get to know her and talk with her a bit. And then after that, Henry requests that he needs a barber. So he needs a haircut. So he requests a barber to come. He arrives and starts shaving him. And his barber ends up treating him like super rude, like way rude. And there's no reason for it at all, but he's just like being really weird. And then you find out that the porter tells him later on, like after his haircut, that the barber thought that he mistook him for an Austrian soldier and was going to slit his throat during his haircut. Like, he couldn't decide whether he was going to kill Henry or not. And so that's like a really funny portion of the story. He almost gets his throat slit because the barber thought he was an Austrian. So first and foremost, during wartime especially, racism really strong in these times. But luckily he survived the endeavor, and the porter just ended up laughing at him and everything. He thought it was hilarious. But after the barber and the porter leave, Catherine enters. Catherine's finally here. And this is when Henry finally realizes, or at least he thinks that he realizes, he believes that he is in love with Catherine Barclay. He pulls her into the bed with him, and they make love for the first time. This is definitely not any kind of, obviously, like, this is not a smutty book at all. Like, there's no, like, great detail that it goes into about any of the sexual interactions between any of the characters. I think that's fairly obvious, especially for the time that the book was written, despite the fact that Ernest Hemingway at this time was kind of pioneering a new form of literature in the way that he was writing and the style that he was using. He doesn't include any explicit material or even like kind of like saucy material or anything like that. So don't have to worry about that. But the way that he does describe it is extremely romantic, and it's very romantic. That's basically what I can say about it. It was a pretty good chapter to read. It's tastefully done, the sex scenes. So that's the end for chapter 14. We're going on to chapter 15 now. Henry meets a thin little doctor who removes some of his shrapnel from his leg. But the guy is so frail and tiny, the book says, that, like, because obviously this shrapnel is, like, a ton of it is all in his legs. And so it's tiny and, like, hard to get out, and you have to be a little gentle because you don't want to hurt your patient too bad. So it could be tiring for someone, but apparently he was especially frail and was too tired to continue on, which I think is kind of annoying. But he ends up becoming exhausted and has to quit. So that's weird. And the doctor ends up sending Henry for an x-ray because he's like, I'm tired of doing this. Just go have an x-ray. And then later on, after the x-ray, 3 doctors arrive to consult the case. This is when there's a point where certain characters try and point out that there are 3 of them because not one of them could do the job, and that none of them know how, and that they're just totally ignorant. They really rip on doctors in this chapter of the book, which is in a really funny and tasteful way as well. Golly, my nose is so dry. Okay. And they all agree pretty much that Henry should wait 6 months before having any kind of operation to try and fix his knee and leg. And immediately Henry jokes about, like, well, just cut my leg off, then just amputate my leg, because, I'd rather do that than stay in bed for 6 months. And of course he's joking. He's just being, difficult. Because I think that everyone can pretty much sense that these doctors don't know what's best. And in addition, even if they do, if there was any opportunity for Henry to try and get out of bed earlier, that's what he would do. Which is an interesting thing that Henry might want. Obviously, it's something else. He says that he wants to get back to the war. But that doesn't really line up with his values or like any of his previous behavior. It seems a little bit out of character for him because if you remember in the previous chapters, he had assisted one of his fellow soldiers in, effectively injuring himself or furthering his injury, like hitting him in the head and causing him like a major cranial contusion and probably like a really bad concussion, so that he could get out of the service for a while and have a break. And so he's not extremely loyal to the cause or to his military, which, whatever, that's who Henry is, I guess. And then now all of a sudden, whenever he's hurt and out of commission for nearly almost 6 months, he wants to get back out there right then and there, despite already admitting in the previous two chapters back to the priest that he hates the war. So I don't know. Obviously, there's something about maybe him being laid up in bed, not being able to move or walk around, that causes Henry to really be motivated to take some risks, roll the dice, and try and get out up on his legs as soon as possible. So, 2 hours later, or right then and there, Henry demands that he have a second opinion from another doctor. So 2 hours later, a new character comes in. Dr. Valentini arrives. This guy's pretty cool. He's cheerful, he's energetic, and he's competent. And he's also one of the only people, especially the doctors, that has a drink with Henry. All the rest of the doctors, it says specifically in the book, and this is part of why Henry didn't like them very much and doubted their competence, is because they refused to have a drink of his cognac. So they wouldn't have any vermouth with him, and that really kind of rubbed Henry the wrong way. And so, I mean, granted, me personally, I feel like I wouldn't want my doctors to be drinking, but, whatever. It's all up to people, I guess. I don't know. He has a drink with Henry and agrees to perform the necessary operation in the morning. He says, yeah, we don't have to wait 6 months to operate. We can do it tomorrow morning. And so Henry's super happy about that and says, right on, brother. We're going to do the operation. And you should be fixed up in like a month maybe afterward. So that's pretty much chapter 15. They're on their way to do the operation. And chapter 15 ends, and then chapter 16 begins. This is the same day, pretty sure. Catherine spends that night in Henry's room because, they like to get a little saucy now. They've had the taste of the sexy time, and they cannot let go of it. They're ready. They're willing and ready. They want to have the saucy time more and more often now. So again, this is a more romantic scene. Generally, when we have these nighttime interactions between Catherine and Henry, it is very romantic, mood lit, and everything like that. They lie in bed together, watching the night through the windows, and they have this moment of like fright a little bit as the hall monitors, I guess, other nurses that are on the late shift, parole the hallways with a flashlight. They can see it go across the ceiling and everything, and they have a bit of a nervous moment, but they pretty much reassure each other that they won't come in and do any checks at night, this late at night, and that no one will find them and it'll be okay. And yeah, Catherine reassures him of that. And so they sleep together, and then in the morning, Henry decides that they should go to the park to have breakfast, and Catherine prepares him for operation. He urges her to come back to bed, and she refuses him, telling him that he probably won't want her later that night when he returns from surgery, because he's going to be all groggy and like conked out from the anesthetic. She tries warning him that all those kind of drugs tend to make patients really chatty. So certain anesthetics, even alcoholics, work as kind of like a truth serum. Catherine tries to warn Henry of this, says, do not open your mouth and brag to everyone about our affair, okay? Because that might happen when you're under this anesthetic, and I need you to not do that. Please don't do that. Because culturally that would just be awful. So he swears up and down that he won't, and they, from that point, kind of segue into the topic of their affair, and Catherine asks him about how many women that he has slept with, because women love to ask this question. They love it. They're always the first people to ask this question. They always ask the guy, how many women have you slept with? How many women have you had sex with? Oh, gosh. What do you answer on that one, right? It's like, do I tell the truth? Like, assuming that the number is, like, more than 1 or 0, it's probably not going to pan out very well. Do I tell a lie? Lies aren't good, but, like, maybe they're better. It's like the whole deal, like, if they ask you if they look fat in that dress, you just lie because it's what they want. In this situation, Henry has a good feel for it, and he answers, none. I've never slept with any women. And though she knows that he's lying, she is pleased with it. Which, to me, is just another example of, like, them having them having like more games. Like they're just playing more and more games with each other, which like I thought they decided that they weren't going to play those games. That's another type of game that people play with one another, is that they say, oh no, we're going to stop playing all these games with each other. We're not going to tell each other that we love one another and not actually love each other. Yada yada yada, all this other stuff. And that in itself is just a game. It's a meta game. So they continue down these paths with one another, kind of this cat and mouse type thing, deceiving each other, and it's just ridiculous. So we are now on to chapter 17. This is post-operation, and Henry is really sick. He gets super sick from this operation, and as he recovers, 3 other patients come to the hospital. A boy from Georgia with malaria, a boy from New York with malaria and jaundice, and then a boy who tried to unscrew a fuse cap from an explosive shell for a souvenir. Which, when you read what happened to that boy, it makes me, it hurts. It just makes my stomach turn, because I'm just like, dude, you just didn't need that. You didn't need that as a souvenir. You really didn't. One thing that always makes my stomach turn and makes me feel sick is thinking about how people have like mortally wounded themselves, or like, like wounded their person and just caused them to be like some kind of deformity, for no reason. Like it was just there was no purpose. Like it wasn't like you were serving your country in the war, or like I saved somebody else's life by doing this. It was just needless and useless, like it was for entertainment or something. I just hate when that kind of thing happens to people, and that's the case with this boy who tried to unscrew a fuse cap from an explosive just to have a souvenir. So Henry develops an appreciation for Helen Ferguson, who helps him pass notes to Catherine while she's on duty. So he's finding different ways to be romantic while he's stuck in bed. And he asks if she will come to their wedding, and Helen responds that she doubts that they'll even get married. And just knowing, like, from the beginning, I don't know what it is about Henry and Catherine's relationship, but you just feel like there's something lacking, like it's just not all the way there, and that something's missing. And so, for whatever reason, when Helen speaks on like Catherine and Henry's relationship, you kind of agree with her. You're like, yeah, something about their relationship makes me think that they're not going to get married either. So I feel like Helen knows what's up. She has some kind of connection, some kind of wise life experience that cues her into whether or not they will, have a successful relationship or not. Which in and of itself, just like, what is a successful relationship anyways? That's when we get into more like skewed type stuff, because we can see some more cultural alterations taking place here with this piece of literature. Certain individuals attempting to break out of the boundaries of what is socially or culturally accepted, especially as far as like, romantic relationships go. Worried for her friend's health, Helen convinces Henry that Catherine should have a few nights off. So Henry agrees with this because she's working the late night shifts almost every time. And Henry manages to speak very frankly with Miss Gage about getting Catherine some time to rest, and she ends up doing it. Catherine returns to Henry after 3 days, and they enjoy a passionate reunion. Yet another sexy time scene. Very sexy time. Again, very romantic, very tasteful, wonderful. Now we're on to chapter 18. Woot woot. So, this is a bit of a time jump, I think. It takes a while to recover from these surgeries, especially during those times. Obviously, like today, we can do all kinds of really cool stuff with like laparoscopic incisions. We can go in with cameras and do all kinds of things. Very minimalistic, minimally invasive operations today in 2020. But 100 years ago, not so much. These surgeries were majorly invasive. Not to mention the fact that like his knee was destroyed just right off the bat anyways, so it didn't really matter all that much. It's going to take a long time for his knee to fully recover, that much flesh being separated from itself. So this is during the summer, chapter 18. Henry learns to walk on crutches. He and Catherine enjoy their time together in Milan. This is like the calm period. Everything has calmed out. We had a bit of a stress about whether or not the surgery was going to go off correctly or not. We already had this action of him getting hurt in the first place. This new formation of the romance, all was like a whirlwind romance is pretty much what we're experiencing here between Catherine and Henry. And so now things have kind of mellowed out a little bit. Things are not as new as they were, and very quickly they become accustomed to one another and they have time to breathe. It just seems like a very nice, serene situation for the both of them. They end up befriending the head waiter at a restaurant called the Grand Italia, and Catherine continues to spend her nights with Henry. They just keep boning every night pretty much in their ultra romantic ways, and it's at this point that they do something very common. I feel like lots of people in relationships do. They pretend that they are married, and though Henry admits that he is glad that they're not, they end up discussing marriage, and Catherine, sure that they would send a married woman away from the front, remains opposed to the idea. So this is an interesting situation because, first of all, everyone enjoys pretending to be married, but no one wants to actually be married, because then that would mean there would be tons of work, right? And then you can't leave the person, especially in this time and age. You couldn't leave them. Marriage was still extremely frowned upon at this time. You would have actually been like bound by ball and chain, right? And so now there's all kinds of extra implications when you're legitimately married. But pretending to be married, then you have all of the feeling of the fuzzy warmth and newness of it, and the novel experience of pretending to be married as if you are. You can even behave with one another without having any kind of effect of conscience that that you might as well be married. And then Henry has the honesty about him to say that he is glad that they're not, right? Which is good of him. At least he's honest about it and with himself. But then Catherine uses this cop-out, she says, well, we wouldn't want to be married anyways because they would send me away and then we couldn't be together, which is, to me, just a big excuse, honestly. Anyway, Catherine pledges at that point that she'll be faithful to him, and says that she's sure that all sorts of dreadful things will happen to them, but unfaithfulness won't be. So she basically just says that she'll never cheat on him, and that she doesn't think that Henry would ever cheat on her. So there's no reason for us to be like joined together with marriage. And plus, in addition to that, she says, I'm more married than anybody else. I couldn't be more married. And basically puts forth the argument that they've already had sex, and that joined them together in marriage, and that the way that they feel about one another joins them together just like marriage. So I don't know. I feel like a bunch of excuses here. A lot of things that so many people tell themselves. I feel like I've even been in situations similar to this. So that's why I can kind of call each of these characters out on their bullshit pretty much, and say that they're just trying to say things that will make themselves feel better about the situation without actually having to take full responsibility for what they're doing and for each other. So already whenever you read that, you kind of realize that maybe the nurse, what is her name? Helen. Yeah, Miss Helen. Miss Helen knows what's up when she says that they're never going to get married. You kind of get the same vibes that no, they're actually not going to get married. and it's not going to go off the way that they think it will be. They're already skeptical about marriage, so of course it's probably not going to happen. Okay, so now we're on to chapter 19. When Henry's not with Catherine, he spends his time with various people from Milan. So he kind of just hangs out in the city, in the town. He keeps company with the Myerses. The Myerses is an older couple. The Myers is an older couple who enjoy going out to the horse races. And one day after running into the Myerses on the street, Henry enters a shop and buys some chocolates for Catherine. Oh, it's so nice. More romantic type things. More honeymoon phase type behavior. Love it. At a nearby bar, he runs into Ettore Moretti, an Italian from San Francisco serving in the Italian army, and Ralph Simmons and Edgar Saunders, who are two opera singers. Not totally important for the story, but interesting characters nonetheless. We haven't met any artsy type people yet, so that's cool. Ettore is very proud of his war medals and claims that he works hard for them. So this guy's in the bar, he's a little drunk, and he keeps spouting off about how he earned all of his medals and how, it's great that he had the opportunity to get them and everything. He's a little bit of a big head character. Big head in the way he's prideful and a little egotistical. Henry calls the man a legitimate hero, right? You can't discredit him for all the things that he did in war to earn those medals. But notes that he's incredibly dull. So there's not a ton of substance about him, and that, he could be a deeper individual if he would, go the extra mile to connect with people. But he doesn't. He cares more about what he has done, rather than like what he could do or the effects that it had and the things that he did. When he reaches the hospital, he chats with Catherine, who cannot stand Moretti. She pretty much just like spouts off her disdain for this man, and she tells Henry that she prefers the quieter English gentleman type heroes. And they both go on into the night, and it begins to rain. So while they're talking, they're just chatting it up, and it starts raining. Lightning strike. Now this is really romantic here. But Catherine fears the rain, which she claims is very hard on loving, which is a little weird. I don't know. That's a bit of a strange thing to say. Like, I don't know exactly what that means, but she says it. She says that rain is very hard on loving, and she starts to cry until Henry comforts her and tells her that it's all going to be okay. We've had several instances from Catherine in which she just kind of randomly starts crying, like sobbing. I don't know if that's like a regular thing. Like, I think I know a few. Maybe I'm just out of touch with like the general like emotional expressions from women. Maybe I'm really like out of touch with all that. But it just seems weird to me that such odd moments she just starts sobbing. I mean, it could very easily just be, she's feeling some emotional strife, anxiety, some kind of sadness or depression or worry about things, and just isn't expressing them, and instead is crying about, is like misplacing them on other things like the storm or something like that. Like, the storm is scaring me and I'm crying, but really it's this other thing. I don't know. But she cries, and Henry comforts her. She like lays on his chest and everything. Again, another romantic scene. Like, you can't really downplay how romantic this whole book is. It's very romantic. And honestly, it makes all of this like kind of terrible relationship between Henry and Catherine almost seem desirable. So whether or not that's good or not, probably not. Probably shouldn't desire their relationship, because it's honestly not the best. But we are done with chapter 19. We will move on to chapter 20. So Henry and Catherine go to the races with Helen Ferguson, whom Henry calls Fergie. Fergie, what a cute little nickname for Ferguson, especially for a woman. Fergie's a little better. and the boy who was wounded while trying to unscrew the nose cap on the shrapnel shell. So he comes along because, you got to pity that kid. Like, so I can't even imagine, like, what he even looks like. I'm sure it's just devastating. Like, for an explosion to go off right in your face, like you're just holding it. Oh, my gosh. So they end up betting on horses based on Mayers' tips. So Mayers gives them tips and tells them who to do it on and how to do it and why. And Mayers is actually usually right. He usually wins all of his bets pretty successfully. But he's kind of weird about it. He's pretty secretive and selective about what he'll tell people. So obviously he must have some kind of in on the whole horse race situation. So while watching the preparations for the race horses, they pretty much never win more than 1,000 lyre, which isn't that much. Catherine sees like a purplish black horse, and she points out to Henry that she's pretty sure that that's just like a horse that it's like mane has been dyed to try and disguise its true color, because of course, like, I'm sure a lot of people in the horse race community begin to like identify and memorize like what horse looks like what, and you can pretty much tell which ones are which and how many races they've won or lost, and like use those to try and determine how much you should bet on them. And so the motivation here to dye the horse purplish black would be to try and make it look like an unknown horse, or a horse that no one knows, or like where you can't easily identify it, so that people won't obviously bet on that one. But in any case, and in addition to that as well, is that certain people could bet on the horse and make lots of money, because say there's a horse that the probability that it will win the race, if it has a high likelihood of winning, then the less you'll get back on your bet that you place on them. So like the most likely, the best competitor, the champion horse, will make you the least amount of money. You'll have to wager more and more and more in order to get a better return on your bet that you place. Whereas if you bet on an underdog, although the under horse, you can bet less and get more back. You could even get twice. You could double your money, on these kind of, or triple your money on these bets. Whereas the returns on the more likely wins will be much less. Anyway, basic betting. I'm sure everyone knows that. So as Italian horse racing is pretty much known, or rumored at least, to be extremely corrupt. So they look out for these techniques of dyeing horses and trying to disguise them so that they can, run a champion on the racetrack. But Catherine's pretty sure that the horse is indeed a champion, just dyed and in disguise. So she and Henry bet their money on it, but win much less than they expected. So in this case, the bookies knew that horse was the champion, and then extorted everyone else because they knew it was going to win. So they put the return very low on the horse. So again, just another testament to the fact that Italian horse racing at that time may or may not have been corrupt. Anyway, Catherine eventually grows tired of the crowd, and she and Henry decide to watch the remaining races by themselves. They claim in the book that they feel better or less lonely when they are alone together. Now, this again is another relational experience that I have. I have been in relationships with women where, like, long-term ones for multiple years, where it is much easier to exist outside of like a social sphere. Like, you don't want to be around other people. It's much easier if just the two of you are together. You feel much better about this. And the reason for that usually is because your relationships aren't compatible unless you're with one another, because then you can just exclude all of those incompatible portions of your character that are forced to come out and to cooperate with others, and you can just, link up together in this one very specific way that you've both figured out how to exist. So I would say, if you want to look at like relationships that are potentially going to work out with like long term, are ones that you can hang out with that person with almost anyone else. right? Usually that's a good I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not a good marker, a good way to figure out whether or not you'll last or not. But it's just one experience that I've had where, she always wants to be alone because when we're with the friends, it's not good. I mean, it's possible that the people that you're hanging out with, you shouldn't be, and that's why you're not getting along with them and you'd prefer to be alone. In which case, take care of your friends, get rid of them or something like that. They're surely not worth, like, say, your wife or something. But at the same time, if it's just a girlfriend, get rid of them. It's just not worth it. If your friends are good for you, that is. Whichever one's better. But yeah, it's just another one of those things that I feel that Henry and Catherine are incompatible and so have to be isolated in order to get along, I guess, and feel like they're having a good time. So that's like one of just another thing. I feel like the last 10 chapters have just been example after example after example of why these two aren't going to last. And you could count it as foreshadowing, whatever you want, but I feel like Ernest Hemingway is just continually telling us that things aren't going to end very well between these two characters. Catherine and Henry are not going to walk down the aisle happily, and they're not going to have a bright, shiny time with each other. And I don't know how it will turn out, but it definitely won't be with wedding bells. So that's pretty much the end of chapters 11 through 20. So yeah, we'll go through some more important aspects of the characters real quick just because we have time. I think we may have before already, but we will see. Where did we go through? So we got some new characters in here, so we can definitely take a look at them. So Helen Ferguson, Fergie, is a nurse's aide who works at the American hospital and a dear friend of Catherine. Though Helen is friendly and accepting of Henry and Rinaldi's visits to Catherine early in the novel, her hysterical outbursts over Henry and Catherine's immoral affair establishes her as an unhappy woman who is paranoid about her friend's safety and anxious about her own loneliness. She is, to use, there's a word on here, but it's very inappropriate. I don't want to say it, but she is a blocker of sorts. She's very annoying. So that's one thing that wasn't included in a lot of the summarizations, is that Helen Ferguson is so annoying. One of the other aspects of that previous chapter, chapter 20, that you could make an argument that they wanted to be alone together, not because of any like inability to interact with other people together, but instead because Helen Ferguson, Fergie, is the most annoying character of all time. She is the stereotypical like girlfriend's friend that just ruins everything, and she continues to do these things throughout the story, and we will be able to see more action on her part that makes her the poster child for annoying girlfriend's friend, for sure. There will be no shortage in that, and I am positive that I will have many opportunities to rant about Helen Ferguson and about how annoying she is, but that's Helen Ferguson. Okay, we'll cover her again later. We have two more sessions here. We got only 21 more chapters left. So Miss Gage is an American nurse who helps Henry through his recovery at the hospital in Milan. At ease and accepting, Miss Gage becomes a friend to Henry, someone with whom he can share a drink and gossip. So she's like one of the old things. For some reason, I had this thought about Miss Gage, and that's messed up, Helen. Yeah, she really is, honestly. Helen is so annoying. Like, it just gets worse from here, honestly. She's just attached to Catherine's hip and will not let her do anything. And honestly, like, the whole deal about their relationship, she just butts in too much. She gets into their business and she shouldn't, and it's just so awful. Miss Gage, for some reason, the nurse that discovers his vermouth and then says that she's, upset that he didn't invite her for a drink. For whatever reason, I don't know how old she is. I don't know the situation here. But for some reason, there was like something perked up in my mind that she was somehow going to be the new romantic interest, and that the romance was going to switch from Catherine to Gage, and that wasn't the case, because we've already left that portion of the hospital where Gage is taking care of him. But for some reason that was the case, and part of me was just because she didn't like Catherine, and because she said that they weren't going to get married. But anyway, here's Miss Van Kampen. This is Miss Van Kampen is a superintendent of nurses at the American hospital in which Catherine works. Miss Van Kampen is strict, cold, and unpleasant. She disapproves of Henry and remains on cool terms with him throughout his stay. Yeah, she's a stereotypical like older woman that is very staunch about everything and like really hard on everyone, and you're just like, come on, Miss Van Kampen, just lighten up a little bit. Like, you don't have to be that mean to everybody. Why you got to be that way? We don't really actually get to encounter Van Kampen very much, so she's not a super important character. Dr. Valentini, maybe I like understated his character. So Dr. Valentini is the guy who operated on Henry and like fixed up his knee like the next day. He's an Italian surgeon who comes to the American hospital to contradict the hospital's opinion. So like he comes to the hospital and says everything that those 3 doctors told you is wrong. We will be operating on you tomorrow morning and you will be good within a couple weeks. So, in my view, like he's just kind of like an alternative medicine badass. Really enjoy Dr. Valentini. And the way that he's portrayed in the book too, he's very suave and cool, very loose and open, to have a fun time and to have a drink and everything. Very cool. Dr. Valentini, one of the more suave, cool guys in the story. And that's pretty much the extent of the characters that we can cover today. But we will be sure to add more characters to the list and do more extensive character summaries as well, just so that we know who we're talking about here. But yeah, so we've done about an hour discussion today, which is a little less than usual, but these 20 chapters haven't been very talkative. There's not a lot of points to cover on all of these chapters. They were also, this is about the very middle of the book that we're getting into, and the middle of the book is not as interesting as the following 21 chapters. So things are going to ramp up very quickly and in a big way. So be excited for next week. During the week, I will try and probably do both discussions next week, just so that, just because I'll have time to do all the paperwork and write out the summaries and everything like that and prepare for the discussion. So I hope you guys enjoyed covering these chapters. I feel like Henry is in a position to where everything is okay now, and at some point things are not going to be okay. This is kind of the calm before the storm, I feel like, and everything is great right now. He's going out, his knee is recovering, he's being able to spend every night with the woman that he loves and have sex and indulge himself. He's drinking plenty of alcohol as usual, and he's going out to horse races, having fun with acquaintances and friends. He's even spending time with some of his fellow hospital patients, younger children, and so I feel strongly that some kind of unrest or some kind of call to action is going to approach him soon, and we'll hopefully be able to see what that is next week. So just again, if you guys would be so kind as to follow or subscribe, we would really appreciate that. This Saturday, if you want to join us live on Twitch, you can find the links down below in the description. We will be going live this Saturday at 8 p.m. Central Time, and we will be discussing chapters 5 through 8 of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. If you'd like to purchase a copy of any of these books to follow along with us, you can find those links in the description below as well. If you use those links, a portion of the sale will go to support us. We would love for you to support us, because it gets a little expensive having to buy several copies of the same book. We do try and purchase locally. We purchase from our local bookstore, and we like to keep our money here locally, and also support people, especially during these trying times. So I hope you guys all stay safe, stay healthy, and continue reading. We'll see you this Saturday. And my name is Maverick Evans, and this has been the Fall Book Club. See you guys.